Well, thank you, Chris. That's
You're very
interesting
welcome.
video, and I think that'll get us chatting. So let me ask the other panelists. Let me start with Obed. Is this your workforce? Is this your workplace?
It's pretty interesting. It's funny. Well, the nice aspect of it is that they showed onboarding, so there'll be an HR department by 2020. So we'll still be employed. So, it's funny. 5 years ago, we had our head of HR pulled a number of us together to look at what the world of work would be like 20 or 30 years out. And how do we prepare ourselves today in order for the future of the workforce? And in a number of the ideas that are illustrated here with things that we came up with individuals being free agents, individuals looking to learn prior to them coming to work, as well as having global experiences. So when you start to look at the way in which we've provided access and in bringing to individuals, a number of the things that you see there is illustrated in the workplace today. So today, this past summer, we had interns who were in Nigeria, in South Africa, in Brazil, so prior to their completing work. And then when you think about the element of the onboarding, it was quite interesting that there Katja would go. She didn't start the morning with Tai Chi like we did. However, she when she was able to download on her device on her wrist, as many of us do wear, she was able, today we're actually able to start to send pre-boarding materials to candidates and 30 days, 60 days before they actually start. So when they do start, they've already would have selected the manager or already would have been ready for work. So you can start to see elements of these things happening right now.
Well, Rob, is the same with you? Or?
Yeah, I love the technology, but I really love the transparency. So when you saw her kind of click on rating your manager and kind of picking that, it's about a transparent culture where people are willing to share their thoughts and ideas. And, it's like if we take Amazon and we take that best rating and best advice that we get from crowd knowledge and you bring that inside a workforce, those conversations are happening anyway. Like they're happening in the lunchroom or they're happening on LinkedIn or they're happening outside of the company. Bringing those insights in allows the organization to take advantage of those and use them for everyone. So I love it.
Was that the typical response, or
Yeah,
is this real?
Well, I think the interesting thing about it, so just a little qualifier, this is a scenario taken from a book written by Jean Meister, who's the founding partner of Future Workplace. And she's casting, she's telling a story about how this might work. So I think but the interesting piece of this to me is that it shows the sort of intersection of trends, right? So to your point earlier, it's not one thing, it's how these kinds of various mega trends or factors are going to sort of interoperate and interact, if you will. So certainly there's a technology aspect, there's a transparency aspect, there's an openness around what kind of tools you use. And I think, again, we have to keep in mind as the future workplace evolves that it isn't just one thing. It isn't, say, gamification or social media or technology. It's this convergence, multi-generations. It's lots of different factors. And the challenge is how do you manage and rationalize all those different megatrends and factors to drive your business model and support HR functions.
So actually, I'm glad you mentioned generation, because I want to liaison over to that, because you can't go to a conference without talking about multi-generations in the workforce. So I'm going to start off with Rob. Are millennials any different than other generations before them, or are they special?
I think they reflect, to me, you and I talked about this before on our phone call, but you kind of laughed when I said it, but millennials to me bring forward all of those don't wait till tomorrow hopes that every generation before them brought. So they don't want to wait and volunteer when they're at the end of career. They don't want to wait and have a mentor and be a mentor after they've capped. They actually want to do that, and they've been doing that. And one of the great lessons that I had a few years ago, we were interviewing a class of college interns, and I was really struck with somebody's, from like middle school on, their community involvement. In fact, it was an entire separate page on their resume. And I've never seen that before, and I've interviewed folks. Being at Capital One for 18 years, we've all interviewed a lot of folks. And I asked her, I said, tell me a little bit about this. Like, was this encouraged by your school? Was it encouraged by your parents? Like, where did all this community involvement come from? And she's like, well, why are you asking? And I said, because to a prospective employer, it really shows commitment and dedication, and I bet you've gotten some guidance on that. And she said, I'll be honest with you, I love your question, but I'm a little offended by it. And I'm like, why? Like, I thought it was a great question. And she's like, it wasn't done to get a job. I'm like, okay. She's like, I think corporate America thinks of volunteerism and community service as a way to get a job. She's like, my generation was raised to give back. Like, we're the generation that in kindergarten, we planted a vegetable garden outside of our classroom and donated it to a local feeding shelter. So it's just a very different mindset. And for me, I stop and ask myself, what is it that this generation wants that we can all relate to? They want meaning, they want purpose, they want connection, and they don't want to wait to get it.
So Obed, you are nodding your head in agreement because you just did a large study with millennials at your company.
We did. I mean, firstly, to say, I'm commenting off of Rob's statement, absolutely agree. And I actually think is something that Carol said earlier during the introduction with regard to getting a thank you from the millennial generation that prompted, I think what enables millennials to think and behave and ask for the things that they're looking for is the environment that boomers have created for them. So the credit would go to the individuals who would have been the school teachers that would have showed them the planting and so forth would have been a boomer generation, right? So it's creating an environment so that, because at the end of the day, we all have very common needs, but it's the way in which they're expressed or the context by which they're expressed. And then it takes agile leaders to actually think in and manage those different needs in the way in which people communicate them. But this past summer, we get smarter every summer, every time the interns or new hires join us. And we put together a group of millennials and then said, because we're looking at this aspect of engagement and how to create the most engaged workforce, because we see engagement as a key driver to client value, which then translate into business results. So when we're looking at engagement, we thought work life was certainly something that spoke to the heart of engagement, because in a number of our analysis and our data mining, we find that work life is key to engagement. So we said we've had a legacy of policies. So in 1956, long before many of us were born, we actually put the first leave policy in place, right? But we said, that was who we were. What does engagement in work life look like in 2020, 2030? So this group of millennials went out and then they did a nice piece of work in study and came back with some recommendations. One of the things that we were very pleased about was the fact that, it is the tools that many of us in our organizations have in place are the right tools. However, so 88% of our population have said we've got the right tools or we have understanding that they're out there. What they struggled with was how to use them. So we have to do a fair amount, like most of our organizations, of reiterating and training and educating the population of just how to use the tools and the technology that we've put in place. The second area was around evolving the leadership and in creating the context and the culture to enable it so that individuals can feel like that they can take take advantage of the benefits that have been provided for them. And then lastly, and then we saw it also in the video, is the emergence of technology. Is taking advantage of the game-changing technologies that then will enable greater work life. So one of the tools that we're looking at is our cognitive technology through Watson. We'll talk about in a little bit. But it is using new technologies that engage systems of one or individuals of one so that it enables them to open up and then use technology more effectively. So I thought they did a great piece of work.
Yeah, very interesting. So Chris, you comment on this, but I want you to touch on, because you had the gaming in there.
Yeah.
And people say that Generation Z is going to drive this even further for us.
Well, just to follow on the thread that these gentlemen were talking about, I think we're also seeing, I don't know if flattening is exactly the right qualifier, but sort of a blurring of lines between generations as technology becomes more pervasive and social becomes more adopted. The fastest growing segment on Facebook is like 55 to 64-year-olds or whatever. So I think we're discovering that millennials and boomers and traditionalists and Gen Z and Gen Y have many of the many similar sort of objectives: work-life balance, the importance of giving back, the focus on trust, on responsibility as a global citizen. So I think that we're seeing that trend, and it's something we need to keep in mind, certainly from an HR perspective, right? That the lines are somewhat blurring, that the clear demarcation that we may have been comfortable with to date is starting to evolve and morph. So, but gamification. So,
Will Z be driving it?
I think Z and Y are driving it. I mean, I have a son who just graduated from college. He grew up playing RuneScape, and he was a big Xbox guy. Still does, Halo and Call of Duty. And I think the skills that they learn there about collaborating, sharing, building teams are translating into workplace settings. I think there's some confusion on gamification. Often you say the word and people kind of wince, or they think of like the Big Bang Theory, those guys running around and playing on TV. But in fact, we just did a survey, actually, some research on gamification in the workplace, and discovered that gamers cross all generations, that they're probably more heavily skewed toward Y and Z, but there are gamers, of all ages that are very into it and that do it. I think the net, too, is to keep in mind that gamification at its very basic is behavioral science, right? It's game mechanics used to drive behavior change, learning or motivation or community building or whatever. So at the end of the day, from an HR perspective, you need to look at processes that might benefit from that kind of rethinking or perspective. And it doesn't work in every situation, certainly. And we find that in sales training, it works really well because they're focused on points and getting at the top of the leaderboard and getting badges. But we're also seeing it being used in leadership development and management training, certainly in onboarding, and lots of other functions within HR.
Serious games.
Yeah.
So I want to actually go to another topic, virtual collaboration, because that's been around for a long time, everything from the phone calls to WebEx to telepresence. And Obed, you had brought up a really interesting anecdote, because I still meet people who love to collaborate using virtual technologies, and I meet people who just don't. So maybe you could share that anecdote and give us your philosophy on virtual collaboration and what you're doing.
Sure. When you do business in over 160 countries and you have every time zone, it does take a lot of effort in order to collaborate virtually. We still use a very innovative technology that this might surprise you, but the telephone.
What?
Quite a bit. And sometimes, and so although we've moved to video in a number of instances, sometimes because of the time of day or hour, you would prefer to just be behind the security of just the phone and not necessarily be on video. But we have also, so there's technologies that's wrapped around it, whether it's things like same-time meeting or instant chats or where you can actually share screens and then work together in a collaborative way. One of the things that is pretty neat in a number of our labs is that you have ongoing streaming, so that it's as if, to the Bangalore lab is connected to the Austin lab, that's connected to the Yorktown and the City lab, and then you can go and knock on a screen and then start talking to the individual who's sitting in another side of the country or a side of the world, so that they're always on and connected. So having those types of tools available in order to collaborate in a more effective way. The shifts towards social and mobile has also revolutionized this space. I mean, you think about mobile, by the year 2020, it's expected to be 10 billion different devices that are connected. It's moving much more rapidly than landlines. Every day we reach for our phones about 150 times. How many times since the panel has started have you reached for your phone? 40% of individuals go out, and the first thing in the morning that they reach for is their mobile device. It used to be, the person that's lying next to them, but I'm not going to go there. So in these particular environments, recognizing the shifts, so we have actually shifted a lot of our technology and tools to mobile first. So right now we have a team of new hire HR professionals who are working on what are the technologies that should shift to mobile first from an HR perspective to enable managers and sellers. Things like sell and expertise location are shifts. And in social, it's not about what you had for lunch or breakfast anymore, right?
Right.
Chris was making comment about the number of individuals in the boomer generation shifting to Facebook. That's why all of the millennials are leaving Facebook because their parents have joined.
Definitely.
So essentially, but it does level the playing field. So before, where someone without social was not able to connect with an executive in headquarters, and because they were in Beijing or they were in Ho Chi Minh City, today through social you can have that ease of collaboration, and it's not hidden behind titles, it's not hidden behind where location. So it does level the playing field, and using those technologies in a way we do it for learning, we do it for management development, we do it for problem resolution, et cetera.
You know, so Rob, do you use any one technology at your firm, or is one better than another? What's your philosophy on this collaboration?
You know, we keep asking ourselves that question, and we'll do a 3-year roadmap for our technology like most companies do. And when you get to the end of year one, it's out of date because there are new technologies. And so I like to think of it as if the end state in collaboration is like your favorite remote beach, the more roads you can build to that remote beach, the more people that get to enjoy the view. So, you know, if it's telepresence, if it's a cell phone, if it's a landline, if it's email or chat or Twitter or social, whatever those tools are that work for your workforce, it's a bit more about studying their habits. One of the best courses I ever took was an introduction to architecture, and I took it in my undergrad, and I've not done anything with it, but it just appealed to me. And there's a concept that I'm not going to know the name of, but the idea was you build your building, and you don't build sidewalks. You let people walk to the building, and then you build where they walk. And that stuck with me. And so for me, that's a little bit about technology. It's watching what our employees are doing outside, and then building pathways that support them inside.
So do you have bring your own device at your...
We do some of that. We actually have guest networks in most of our large campuses. Being a federally regulated bank, we actually have some really specific device protocols we adhere to.
Yeah.
But having people have their portable device, their mobile device that they can use kind of off network but on property has been a really big win.
Yeah, no, I can imagine. Social. You want to talk about social media,
Sure.
connecting mothers,
Connecting mothers, for sure.
teleworkers, onboarding.
So as I mentioned, you know, the fastest growing demographic is in Facebook is, you know, older people, which is why the kids are now eschewing traditional sites like Facebook and moving more to Instagram, tools like Path even, smaller sort of contained, more controllable social networks. But in terms of the enterprise view, we're seeing more and more adoption of what we're calling enterprise social networks. That's sort of Facebook behind the firewall. Actually, IBM has a fantastic tool. When I worked with Obed at IBM, I deployed many communities using IBM Connections. At Future Workplace, we use Microsoft's Yammer. There's a tool from Salesforce called Chatter, which is much more toward sales-oriented kinds of roles. But we're finding that these tools allow collaboration, expertise location, interaction, flattening of hierarchies in an amazing way that you could never achieve before. And in terms of women and working mothers, we actually worked with a bank that set up a collaboration community and focused it on affinity groups where women could set up sub-communities and talk about topics of interest to them. So everything from sort of career advancement challenges to raising kids to work-life balance to issues with everyday life. And doing it in this private, separate network or community, if you will. So it was safe, risk-free, if you will, minimal exposure. You could invite people if you wanted or not, but having fantastic conversations and sharing expertise and insight and perspective and collaborating in an enterprise environment and supporting women.
So, should I toss my watch? Should I wait?
I could.
Wait.
Actually, I got a call this morning from Lori on my watch. And
So should I wait in line for the iWatch? Is wearable tech?
I have a philosophical issue with the
help me at
tyranny of
work?
Apple, but I think, as to quote Eric Schmidt, right? They asked him about the iPhone 6. He said, "Well, Samsung had that phone a year ago." So I have a phablet myself, actually. I'm a big fan of the Note 3. Just show it off here.
Oh,
It's a pretty cool phone. But I think, again, talking wearable, right? So that's sort of the connection. So this phone talks to my watch. I can get calls on. My favorite stories is I was coming into New York. I live in Connecticut, commuting in. I'm in Grand Central. I'm on the escalator up to, we have an office in Midtown. And I get a call from Gene Meister on my watch. So I answer it on my watch. Hi, Gene. Yeah, how are you? And all these New York business types around me, these investment bankers and whomever. And they're like, who is this guy? What is
Thought you were Michael.
Yeah, I'll be right there. I'm just going up the escalator in Grand Central, but
One out
I'll
of
be
12,
at Dick Tracey, exactly. Actually, I have two smartwatches. The other one will take, it's a Gear 2. It'll shoot video and photographs. It's pretty cool. But I think, let's talk wearables sort of writ large. I think sort of Obed mentioned it before, but as the Internet of Things becomes all pervasive, we're going to see data from sources that we can't even imagine today. I mean, from clothing, right? From the rug, from the furniture, from the walls. You know, they say materials is the next software, right? So windows that respond to light and heat and you know, change their complexion based on what their function is determined to be based on the environment they're in.
So, well, Rob, let me ask you this. I mean, how do we use all this technology? I mean, this is like cool stuff and everything. That's fine, and I like the watch. But how do you use it? Is it relevant to the workforce?
Yeah, I think what we're all pointing toward is not the fun. I mean, it's fun, it's interesting, it's clever, but it's the insights that we get from it. So when your bathroom scale knows your body mass index, and then your refrigerator knows what you've taken out of it, and then your wearable knows how many steps you've taken. The idea is that you get insights. You get insights that you wouldn't normally get. And the insights might be, hey, walk a few more steps, or hey, switch from orange juice to water. I don't know what the insight might be, but you'll get those insights. And so I think that's what we're all wanting for is insights, meaning, and what I like within an organization, it's collaborating around those. So rather than me having an insight in my part of the organization and you not having it, the collaborative technology allows us to share and then allows you to build on it. Many of you probably watch CBS Sunday Morning. That's a little ritual at our house. My 9-year-old son, Max, loves that show. And so we watch every week. And this week there was a piece about inventors, and it was about the history of inventors and how no one person created the computer. But it was actually a series of inventions over time. And collaborators who never met were taking each other's technology and taking it to the next level. And I thought about that in our conversation today. Like, this really isn't about one person owning the insights. It's about everything being open sourced. And so I love the idea that all of these devices are collaborating. I don't wear a smartwatch. I'm probably the only person. For me, it's not my thing. Mm-hmm. I actually like a break. And so for me, my phone is kind of my device of choice, but I like to look at my watch and only get the time and the date. Other than that, I don't want to know what on my watch. So I'll just come out of the closet as like an anti-watch person.
But you see relevance. You see it being integrated into the workforce in some way.
I totally do. Big data is everywhere, and I think we leave a lot of insights on the table. So giving people control over how to use those insights is really key.
Big data. Now, I have to tell you guys, I told Obed that I'm actually stalking someone on his team. It's a big guy. I think it's a big guy. Really smart. In the news all the time, very popular. I actually know where this guy is on any given day. This is how bad a crush I have on this guy. So I said to Obed, I can't believe you work with him because you're in HR. I didn't really want to share that with him, but I really want to meet him. And I want you to tell me more about him. His name is Watson. Tell me about Watson and big data.
So when we had this conversation, it was so funny because I had heard many stories about Watson, but having a crush on him and wanting to be his girlfriend was the first. So I went in and I asked one of our chief inventors and then said to get advice on how to manage this. She said, why would she want Watson? Who wants a know-it-all as a boyfriend?
I'm tired of those dumb men now.
So to tell you a little bit about Watson. So Watson is a cognitive technology. Many in the U.S. would have seen Watson compete on Jeopardy. And then so what it does is it has three fundamental capabilities. One is it adapts and learns. So it continues to learn as it gets taught, just like us as human beings. It also has the ability to create hypotheses and test those and then get smarter again.
And it's a
against time.
supercomputer, correct?
It is.
Simplified, okay.
That has technologies to reason and to perceive. So more than just programmable language, but it actually does have the genuine ability to learn and adapt itself. And the last thing is that you can talk to it in natural language. So in the way in which we would talk, you and I, and it would be able to detect different nuances in language, the difference from on the cloud versus a cloud, the difference between, a humanitarian who may actually, a vegetarian who eats vegetables versus a humanitarian, we won't talk about what they eat. So that type of nuance in the English language, the technology would be able to decipher. And then so we are starting to use it. The first application of Watson has really been in the healthcare industry. And then so because when they saw Watson actually engage with on Jeopardy and win Jeopardy, one of the things, and what is the interesting part about the medical field is that we love having great colleagues. And then they saw the application and they saw Watson in action and said, we want this as a member of our team. So it was growth that was fueled right by the industry from calling up. And then so, more recently, we've now launched at the beginning of this year, and then we just opened a new facility last week in the East Village here in the city in Astor Place. But we are now starting to look at Watson-type technology in the HR environment. So when you start thinking about engaging with an individual, think about someone wants to get to a general manager over the course of their career. So having one-to-one coaching advice with the technology to say, well, I'm actually engaged. During this point in my life, I'd actually I want to start a family, or I can travel less. So the technology can reason and talk with you, and then start to identify roles that can keep you on the path to get to general management, but a role that would require less travel during that particular time. So the technology has that capability, and then as we start to engage in this area of work life, that's one of the advantages we think that we'd be able to provide for employees in the world.
So I'm fascinated there, because you could take Watson and really have Watson tackle any major complex problem, given that you give Watson the data and enough instruction, but it sounds like it can compound so much faster than any of us could solve a problem.
That's right.
But you just
The amount of data that is...
How could you not love this guy?
He's wonderful. He's a great friend. You want him on your side.
So, I want to get some questions from the audience. This is too interesting for me just to do this alone. Do we have mics out there so we can ask some of the panelists? Oh, excellent. Would anyone have some questions? We do. Excellent. Present timing. We got 15 minutes.
Hi. On?
And could you say who you are and what company you work from?
Sure. Hi, Michelle Birnbaum. I'm the Director of Work Life for MetLife. And my question is sort of going to weave in a little bit of last year's conference to this year's session. So last year, I believe it was this conference where someone did a talk about sleeping with your smartphone. And it was a book around, how to manage all of the technology with integrating your work and life and key strategies, because there's a point at which while it can untether folks to do things that they would like to do beyond work and allow you to work from multiple places, there's a point at which it can be unhealthy. So I'd like to ask the panel, with respect to the smartphone, the smartwatch, the iPhone, the touchpads, the potential Watson, where you're having a career discussion, at what point, how would you recommend, making it a healthy transition? So what safeguards are recommended for clients such, that you work with on how to balance, for the average associate, how to leverage all of these technologies to the right advantage, right, without going overboard.
Got it.
Because waking up and first grabbing your smartphone is not necessarily the healthiest thing, right? So I'd like to hear from you as to how this can be done in a healthy way.
So let me start off with Rob. Because you're raising kids and, you have a very busy life. So your comments first.
So I'm glad you asked that question because I had a great getting ready for Thanksgiving last year. We're in the grocery store with everyone else, and it was like the Monday or Tuesday. It wasn't the Wednesday before Thanksgiving. I had a few days. But I remember I'm on my phone looking at my shopping list, and a text message comes in, and the next thing I know, I'm back and forth with a friend. And my son, Max, is like, Daddy, I thought we were Thanksgiving shopping. And I'm like, oh, right. He's going to be a teenager in a few years, and I'm going to want him to put his phone down, and I'm going to want to connect with him, and he's going to be like, but you did this, so, there's a role modeling thing. And so for me, there are two things that I think about. One is around, it's a tool, it's not a game, and that's just my own personal stand, but it's a tool by which I either connect with my friends, my family, my work, and the world outside. And so being intentional about when and how I use it is key. I moved my phone, I sleep upstairs, our bedroom is upstairs, I moved my phone downstairs for that very reason. I wanted the first thing that I saw in the morning to be my son and my dogs, not my phone. And so very practically, that was one of the things that I did. But we also, when we encourage organizations to think about flexibility, we talk to teams about having norms that they come up with and agree to. And one of those could be, are you a lark or an owl? So are you an early bird that's up and kind of doing email because that's the way you set your day? Or are you an owl? You go to the office and kind of do your work, and then the evening is when you unwind and process. And having people know things like that about themselves and about their team helps them know when it's okay to not respond and when to respond. Because there's that inherent social pressure we all have. If you get an email, your brain releases a positive chemical every time you get an email and every time you hit send. And to your point, that happens 150 times a day minimum. But then add on to that, you probably have 150 emails you're responding to on a daily basis. So 300 shots is a very addictive kind of cycle throughout the day. So I really like people kind of finding what works for you personally, but also talking with your team about the norms so you don't feel compelled to always be on.
Yeah, any other panelists want to comment, or do we have other questions?
As the next one is teeing up, I'd just say it's also how you grew up, right? So you find that along with that, you want to make sure that cultural change comes along with the technology change for individuals who need to adapt. But those who actually grew up with that technology, it just becomes a part of who they are. It's just that's the way in which they've interacted. So then that's the way in school, growing up, and then that's the way that they will work.
Oh, very good point.
I would just say in a work context, you need to make sure that the use of the devices driving your role is supporting what you're doing, what you're being paid to do in a company. I think from a personal perspective, it's hard. It's sort of a case-by-case basis. I mean, there's a great book, Hamlet's Blackberry. Anybody know that book? It's about how to manage sort of digital and analog lives. I encourage you to check it out if you haven't read it. It's a really interesting study, and they set up what they call a digital Sabbath, and I think on Saturday, he and his wife and son, the author, don't do anything with computers or electronics or digital data. So one approach.
Other questions? Yes.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Gray. I'm the manager of work-life wellness and flex at AbbVie. And I have a question that's kind of twofold. I'm kind of split on the technology conversation because I feel like technology, especially for those Gen Zs and those millennials, it gives them an advantage because they understand how to use it, but somewhat of a disadvantage because of the interpersonal skills that may be lost by constantly connecting through this media. So I want to get your guys' take on that and what you've seen when interacting with these millennials or Gen Ys. I'm a Gen Xer, so I'm a little biased. And the second part of my question is, technology has often had a negative effect on people's physical health. Being someone who is degreed in exercise science, it's always a concern for me that if people are sitting more than they're moving or typing more than they're talking, that there's a physical element that's put at risk by using this technology. So have you seen in this generation or in your research that technology has had a negative effect on people's physical health And to the lady's point, even their resiliency, because they're constantly connected rather than knowing how to unplug and participate in real life instead of just technology-based life.
You know, I'm going to hop over to Obed on this one because this comes up a lot. You know, each generation has a contribution, and so when I talk to boomers, as you mentioned, or Gen X's, they say, well, the millennials don't know how to communicate, but we do that really well. But then millennials will look at the boomers and say, well, you don't know how to use technology. So how do you normalize that in a company like an IBM, because you probably have multiple generations? And then I can go to Rob as well. It's good points.
So they're great points. And then technology is a tool. It's just like a knife can be very effective in cooking, or it could be quite dangerous as a weapon. And so in the way in which you think about and use things, so I would say in that same vein about physical activity, so I wear Fuel Band, and then actually I think it enables me to be more active, because it gets, in the time that I sit here, it says, go Obed, you're sitting down. So from that perspective, it's how you use the technology and integrate it, and then whether it could make your world, whether it makes you more lazy or it makes you more apt to do things. So I think it's shifting behaviors, and then so, and likewise, I think you might have some millennials who say that, you know, boomers don't necessarily communicate more as often as they can, because so communication down to the principle of it. So just because you're not having a face-to-face conversation doesn't necessarily mean that you're not communicating. So they would say that they're much more connected with their friends, with their family, than some of the boomers who may have to who may look to pick up the phone or meet for dinner, or because
it seems slow.
Right,
Yeah.
it seems slow. So I think it's about how do you integrate it with life and then make it very comfortable for you, and use it as a tool rather than a mandate for the way in which you behave.
Rob?
Love it.
Thoughts on that?
It's about channel. I mean,
Yeah.
it's the channel. And so some of the most meaningful conversations I've had have been a text message with my son when I'm not able to FaceTime with him. And, you know, he loves emoticons, as we all do. But when you put as many as you can on a text message, that means a lot for him. And so for me, it's the channel. And I know exactly what you mean, because we hear that conversation within our organization. You know, this next generation doesn't have the social skills as we've defined them, but there is an ongoing dialogue that happens. And I think just having more room and having more connection with the way you communicate may not be the way I communicate. What's the purpose? What's the content you're trying to get across? And, you know, there's a lot of reciprocal learning that happens. And so when I hear older generations saying we're not as comfortable as technology, younger generations saying I could use some career advice, it sounds like a perfect mentoring match to me.
Yeah, okay, so Chris, because, you know, I think I get, you know, it's almost like a little bit of the differences, the generation differences. There's nobody's right. It's just different. So what are your, you know, so yes, I'm playing on the computer. It doesn't mean I don't not go out to play. You know, it just means that I've integrated that into my life. So.
Yeah, I think, I mean, as each gentleman said, I think, you know, they interact in different ways, and it's, you know, they're communicating, say, on Facebook using Messenger much more frequently, say, than me as a boomer, you know, is doing on the phone. So they do have a different kind of interaction, a different level of intimacy. I do agree, though, that, you know, interpersonal skills, sitting and talking to somebody, that's probably not as high on their list as, say, being on a headset playing Halo.
But that is interpersonal, though. If I'm playing with you, I'm being...
Yeah, it is, for sure. I mean, you come into the room, and, you know, my son's playing with people in Sweden and in Africa and in China or whatever, and that's his way of interacting. Communicating and learning.
They're giving us feedback to be more engaging.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you think about, I was thinking about that just a second ago, when the first generation that moved from a saddling on an animal as a means for transport to get into a car. Imagine what the neighborhood had said about the safety of that particular car.
Yes.
It must be crazy to get in that thing.
Yes.
And so the first generation that does make a move, it does cause a significant amount of culture change.
Yes, it's like, you know, the TV replaced the radio, the computer replaced the TV, so now gaming. So a good question. Yes.
Hi, Hi, good morning. I'm Heather Eck. I'm a senior HR manager at Ogilvy and Mather. So to kind of piggyback off of that question, Ogilvy just recently launched our flexible work arrangement policy, and it took us quite a few years to get it implemented. But one of the statistics that we used to kind of garner support for that was that by the year 2020, about 50% of our workforce will be millennial. So my question is, the flexible work arrangement policy is one step in kind of aligning ourselves to support that generational difference in our workforce. But what are some other things that you think we should be thinking about in terms of ushering in that new generation of people to our workforce by 2020?
I'll leave this open. Anyone would like to jump in on this one?
Where work is done is really important. So flexibility in the past has been really about enabling time off and leave policies, whereas today we're finding more and more that it's not necessarily it's not necessarily when time work gets done, but where work is getting done, and that all provides ultimate flexibility.
Other recommendations?
Go ahead.
I would say that you need to be sensitive to the fact that people working in your company are probably going to only be there, sort of to reference Tracey. I mean, they may be there 18 months, right? Or 4 years is a long time now. Bureau of Labor Statistics says today's learners and early employees are going to have 8 to 10 jobs by the time they're 38. So you as an employer need to be aware that they're going to come into your company, they're going to learn skills, and they're probably going to go on, and with any luck, they'll work at a client, or they'll work at a business partner, or they'll work in the supply chain, or they'll be a media person or an analyst. They'll be in your broader ecosystem. So the idea of inculcating and getting to internalize a sense of your brand and your company's value, I think, is key going forward, so that when they do move into these 8 or 10 new jobs, they'll still think highly of the company that they used to work for, think of them as a viable part of a solution, say, to a problem they're addressing in yet another role 2 or 3 jobs down the line.
Yeah, I would offer congratulations on getting the policy launched. I know that's really big. Like, for many of us in this room, that's been a conversation year over year. The number one suggestion I can offer you, because we've been doing this, since maybe 99, so about 15 years at Capital One, it comes down to the manager. It's a very low-tech conversation, but asking a manager or an executive to audit his or her own calendar for the last 5 business days is an example in flexibility. What they'll tell you is, I'm at the office. I don't have a flexible schedule. I don't have an alternative schedule. And they'll use words like that, like, I don't have kids at home, or I don't have an elderly parent. What do I need flexibility for? And if they're honest, they'll look at their calendar and say, but I was downtown at a client meeting last week, and I did come in late on Tuesday for a doctor's appointment, or I did leave a little early to go with my rec league, whatever their things are. And so what we have found really quickly is flexibility is for everybody. It's not just for working mothers. It's just not for elderly parents. It's not for back-to-school students. It's really for everyone. And I think the way that we talk about that is making it safe for managers and leaders to realize they're already doing it. It takes that fear factor way down. What you then find, sometimes it's their manager who has the fear factor, so just know it's a bit of a domino effect. But if you step into that conversation, you can turn really, really skeptical cynics into positive leaders. I've seen it happen again and again within our own company.
Yeah, good question. Good answer. Yes. Other? I see.
Good morning. My name's Courtney Winfrey. I'm with Grant Thornton. I'm a Gen Wire as well as a personal blogger. So just to go back to...
I hope you're blogging about us.
I will. And I will tweet today. So just to go back to technology, as the diversity coordinator, we talk a lot about retention and retaining our young employees. So just to go with technology being, I wanted to know what your views are on it being an amenity or a retention tool.
Who would like to?
Technology in general, you're saying?
Well, I like the video. I'm a Gen Wire, so like when I watched the video, I was like, oh, that's so cool.
Yeah.
I want to scan my eyeball to get into work, Yeah. But if I was a new employee of yours,
doesn't take much.
Me and my boyfriend, like that would be an amenity for him. He's all caught in the amenities. I'm like, okay, so what's that gonna do for me in the future? So when you talk about technology to a future employee, are you bringing it up as a tool to advance your career, or a tool just kind of like an amenity tool?
Like a perk?
Yeah, like a perk.
Like a perk.
Absolutely.
You know, that is a good point, because companies out by me, offer, I'm out in Silicon Valley, so the Googles, the Facebooks, I mean, they offer so many of these toys and perks, and you get used to it. I mean, everybody at Apple has got like a gazillion toys. I don't know. What are your thoughts on this?
It could lie in both areas, but at the heart of one of the things that we find with IBMers and engaged employees is that the heart of it is doing meaningful work. And then so when that work is meaningful and then it's followed by people have the right capabilities, the right resources, the right tools in order to do that, then they find themselves really engaged. So toys for the sake of toys could be a distraction. However, you know, when you've got them and then they're purposeful and then it drives the, what we do in our careers, what, you know, we work, and then according to some of the latest stats, we're going to be working for a long time. But we work for, it's a significant portion of our lives. So what it is that we remember, what it is that we do and who we did it with. Right? So, and then the things that are around it are other enablers that as long as that it continues to fulfill that purpose of that meaningful work, then I think that it's a plus in the organization.
I would say that's a concept to keep in mind is consumerization of IT, and that often consumer technology is adopted first and then moves into the enterprise, right? So as HR executives, I think you need to be aware that this is happening, it's going on an ongoing basis, and if there's technology that you can use to, say, enhance your digital brand or entice or attract potential employees or top talent, you should definitely, you know, keep your finger on the pulse. I mean, P&G has a very active Twitter account that they use to recruit. They have Facebook pages. We're seeing more and more companies using social tools to identify potential employees. So I think technology writ large is something that, again, the HR function needs to really stay ahead of and be proactive about pursuing and managing.
Rob, thoughts on it?
Yeah, we use a really simple framework. It's called the 3 Ps, and it's people, planet, and profits. And if we can demonstrate that an investment's going to hit all 3 in a meaningful way, that's a pretty good indicator we should do that. So people, planet, and profit.
Good question. Other?
Hi, good morning. I'm Debbie Phillips, WFD Consulting. I want to thank you. This has been a fabulous panel. And my question has to do with innovation and design and technology. We spend a lot of time talking with our clients about implementing new ways of working and using the tools that you're all talking about, not only technology, but also being able to collaborate, not just with technology, and keeping the connections. And I was struck by your earlier presentation around design and thinking about how do you map and think about the design and an enterprise, think about the design as well as the technology to be used when an enterprise has many different needs in terms of how the organization is functioning, and moving sort of from an individualistic sort of approach of how do I work best versus how does the organization work best. So thank you.
I don't think that was a question, but any of the panelists want to comment on that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
No, yeah. So I've gotten the high sign that we're at the end of it, but before we leave, I'd like to start, and I'll just start from the left to the right. Parting words. If you, in maybe 20 words or less, could give some words of wisdoms and best practice to our audience, please do.
Agile thinking, I think, is, and with regard to policy development, is incredibly important. So as one of the things that we've learned is continue to design in an agile way, not necessarily waiting till things are perfect, but continuous release and modification so that we can get to the end result and working it with your clients and with your organization at the same time.
For me, it's become a student of the future. And I will say we just welcomed a new executive at Capital One that joined us from Silicon Valley. And every couple of days I get another blog post that she's scouted. And it's really helping me to be more of a student of the future. And I'll just say, like, the more that you do that, the less it becomes the future and the more it becomes now.
Chris?
I would say the role of HR is becoming more and more critical in driving evolving and disruptive business models, because you're going to be kind of the glue that connects the business to the talent and the resources, right? So getting closer to executives leading business units and being aware of what we call mega trends. So what Tracey was referring to before, impact of disruptive technology, the importance of environment and space, where and how people work, the evolution of social from mobile to wearable, that's another trend that we see. So being aware of how all these trends are going to impact your role and ultimately how your company does business, I would say stay on top of those. You're a student of the future.
So I'd like to thank the panelists for a wonderful panel today, and I'd like to thank you for your time and your great questions.